Welcome back to Performance Process, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz, joining Ronan McLaughlin. Ronan, we're talking about heat today. Actually, you're in a good place for that. Actually, right now, I'm calling you up from. Well, you're in the desert.
I'm currently in Abu Dhabi, but I recorded this podcast in Ireland, which was very, very cold at the time, before I went to Australia, which I thought would be very, very relevant. And now I'm on my way back and stopping over in Abu Dhabi. So hot, cold, all sorts.
Just a world traveler over there. So we're talking heat. We're talking about heat training in particular. Who is the guest today, and why are we talking about this?
Well, actually, we're talking, heat training, heat adaption, the impact that heat has on performance, how to mitigate that, how to actually use training in hot environments to further our performance, and some of the ways of doing that, and what you need to know about implementing heat training into your own training and how to benefit from it, and some of the just some of the potential side effects and some of the dangers are around. It's not just as simple as hopping on a trainer and going as hard as you can with the radiators turned on. There's a little bit more science to it, but it is also probably one of the easiest, cheapest, and let's say effective. I'm not going to say most effective, but effective ways of improving your performance. So it's something we've heard the pros doing a lot of in recent times. And this episode goes into heat training, heat adaption, and why, regardless of whether you're racing or training in a hot or cold environment, that the performance benefits are seemingly pretty real and effective, regardless of what kind of climate you're racing in.
All right, so tease it for me. The performance benefits. What are we talking about here? Like, are we getting hematocrit boosts? What are we getting out of heat training?
Well, I mean, like, the biggest benefit is, especially if you're racing in hot environments, that you can prepare before you go there and you not suffer as badly in the heat, which is obviously a major factor in both the women's Tour Down Under and the men's Tour Down Under, and was why we had this conversation. And then beyond that, regardless if you're racing in or training in hot or cold environments, you get, from doing heat training, you get a boost in blood plasma volume. Well, it has been described as the poor athlete's altitude training. So if you can't afford either financially or time-wise to go to altitude, then this may be a way of getting some sort of similar gains. I think what a lot of teams are starting to do is use the two in combination and using heat training to prolong the effects of altitude training, and we sort of delve into that in the podcast also. But I can't really put a percentage terms on it, but it's something that a lot of riders are acutely aware of now. It's another one of these things that has been around forever, but for some reason has blown up in the last couple of years. That might be at least partially thanks to the guest that we have on the show today to discuss heat training.
Who are we talking to?
We're talking to Chris Bloomfield-Brown, who has spent his entire career in performance. I first came across Chris when he was working with Core, which are the company behind the core body temperature sensors that we see a lot of riders wearing on their heart rate straps these days. And he's since moved on from Core, but obviously he's got a vast experience in all things performance throughout his career, and especially now, having spent the last few years working with a lot of WorldTour teams and professional athletes, and especially in triathlon space as well. He has a huge understanding in terms of how to optimize heat training, how to use heat training, and how to get it right.
All right, let's listen.
Well, Chris, welcome to the Performance Process podcast. Thank you for joining us here today. I think we first were introduced about 3 years ago when I was preparing for that Everesting thing up and down the hill.
And you experimented with heat, I remember. You did a session in your bathroom, in a heated bathroom, and you discovered what we were talking about, heat and how it can affect your performance. Yeah,
well, I did it terribly badly, and that I didn't follow the protocol you gave me at all, and I tried to keep ramping up the power rather than maintaining heart rate. I can't remember what I did wrong. I did something wrong. It was a horrible experience. It was very, very tough, and I ended up pouring a considerable amount of sweat out of my shoes following that ride. So let's try to clarify what I got wrong today in this podcast, and specifically we're here to talk about, well, heat training, heat acclimatisation, all the benefits of understanding and measuring and training the body's ability to deal with and cope with heat, and some of the actual training benefits that
actually stressing the thermal load may actually provide. So I don't know where a good point to start with this is, because it's such a broad subject.
Well, I think it's a great time of year to start thinking about heat, because we're in the midst of winter in where we're both located. So it's snowing outside here. And so, yeah, let's talk about heat. And I think with the example you just gave about when you did your first session, you did it in a heated room. You were preparing for your Everesting. And I think the one thing that really struck out is you couldn't even come close to maintaining the same power that you could a couple of days prior. And it was ridiculously significantly lower and for a short amount of time. And I think you remember you said that wasn't a pleasant experience.
No, there was a point actually where my power and heart rate sort of inverted from the normal, where you perhaps doing maybe 170 watts at 100 heart rate or something like that. And then I got to the point in the heat test where I was doing 170 heart rate for 100 watts, which just was startling to me, the impact that heat can have just by increasing the external temperature and not cooling off effectively, how much of an impact that had on, and detrimental impact it had on my performance.
So that is a brilliant place to start, because that's one point that a lot of people don't realize. And it's hard not to is because what happens is as you exercise and in performance or in competition, your temperature goes up. And as your temperature goes up, your performance, your gross efficiency decreases. And gross efficiency is basically, let's say your gross efficiency is 20%. What that means is to produce 300 watts on your power meter, you need to create 1,500 watts to make 300 watts. And that was 1,290 calories per hour. So if you just do the math to convert it across. So if you take 1,500 watts to make 300 watts, where does that 1,200 watts go?
Well, I think you're about to give us the answer.
It's heat. It's just like a car motor. That's why they have a big cooling system on there and things like that. Car motors are only about 30% efficient or so. So most of the energy that we produce in a petrol motor becomes heat. And your body, most of the energy, calories we consume, when we're translating that to mechanical power, most of that is actually translated and comes out in heat.
I think that's something we hear quite a lot, is that we're only, as cyclists, we're only 20-25% efficient. And we don't really think about what that means. But again, that was another eye opener for me. That is what it means, is that if I'm putting out 300 watts at the pedals, that's only 20% of the power my body is actually producing. The calories that I'm burning effectively to produce that power, that's only about 20% of it. The other 80% is lost through, correct me if I'm wrong, but through thermal regulation. And when you remove the cooling stimulus, that's when my performance declines so rapidly.
Well, actually, the research kind of shows there's quite a few papers, and we backed it up with a couple of projects we were involved in, is basically your gross efficiency changes about 1% for 1 degree C. So if you go from, if your body temperature increases 3 degrees, you're actually losing a significant amount of power. Not 3% gross efficiency. So you go from 20 to 17%, you can just do the math, and you've just lost 45 watts. If you were at 300 watts, you just lost 45 watts. And that's a huge number. But, so here comes the but part. You can do things about it. It doesn't have to affect you. So the first thing to recap is when your temperature rises, when you're exercising, your gross efficiency or your power drops, okay? And it can drop quite a bit. And what happens is when most of us are training, we only train at a lower core temperature. Our body temperatures are a bit lower. But when we compete, we're at a higher temperature. And so what we're doing is when we're competing, a lot of times we're putting our body in a new stress that we're not used to. So it's not as efficient. And all we're doing as athletes is we're making our bodies more efficient. So you're putting your body in a new stress and it can't handle it very well. So a lot of what we call heat training is just putting your body in thermal stress. So when you compete, your body knows how to handle it better. And an analogy I usually give is the first time a person goes into a Finnish sauna, they'll go in there and after about 4 or 5 minutes, they just go, I'm too hot. I have to get out of here. And they eject after a few minutes. Realistically, they haven't got that hot. Their body's just not used to this new stress that it has on it, and it doesn't know how to cope. But if you keep going back after 2 weeks, you're going to be like everyone else said, the Finns who are sitting there reading the newspaper and wondering why these people run out after a couple of minutes. So it's just putting your body in that stress, and it gets more efficient because it's a physiological system to get rid of thermal watts. It's actually thermal watts is what we're getting rid of. So you can make your body more efficient.
The Finnish sauna analogy, makes sense. You're sitting in a hot environment, core body temperature increases. That's hard to handle because you're in a hot environment. Or why is core body temperature increasing when you're in a bicycle race? Is it the intensity or what is it?
It's just, again, simple math. If you're putting up 300 watts, that's 1,200 watts that have to come out of your body. Okay. Yeah, you got to get rid of those 1,200 thermal watts. And if you're putting out 350 watts, then you got to put out more watts. and it's just a matter of if you can get rid of those thermal watts efficiently. So maybe we should, next up, how a cooling system works. And I like to think of it as a simple mechanical system. Is when you get hot, your body vascular dilates the blood vessels close to your skin. Okay, so blood flow gets redirected to your skin, and then plasma comes out as sweat from your blood. And then as that evaporates, it cools your skin, which cools all that blood that's close to the surface. And then that recirculates back around your body to cool it off. And so I like to think of it as a mechanical system. So when blood is being diverted to the skin, it's being diverted away from the working muscle. And you can think of it that way. So there's less oxygen and less blood flow going to the muscles because you're shuffling more blood to the skin surface. It's basically that simple.
Is that kind of why when you pour a cold drink over your skin, that cooling sensation gets cooled down the blood close to the skin, and it's the same effect but from the opposite direction? Is that right?
Yeah, and your body feels that skin's getting colder, and it says, okay, I'm pulling out more thermal watts now. This is all a good thing. So when you actually temperature goes up, your skin gets colder.
That's sort of counterintuitive.
Yeah, but it is true. It's actually even how you get a fever. Yeah. So basically, again, it's almost a mechanical system, and then it's almost a mechanical system. There's other things that are going on, but that's just a simple way to think about it. You get hot, your body shuffles more blood to the skin and away from the working muscles. Then there's a delta between your core temperature and your skin temperature. And what we find is this is almost the really important thing, because what we found is we saw riders in really cold conditions with high core temperatures. They're like the Paris-Roubaix, we see people over 40 degrees, and 39.5 is real common. Even some people approaching, especially some women approaching over 40 degrees, even though it's cold out. But when we see those same core temperatures, like in the Volta, when it's hot out, the performance degradation is even more. And so when your skin's colder, if you have a bigger delta between skin temperature and core temperature, you can get rid of more thermal watts more efficiently. And so you're trying to cool the skin because you can do that. And if your skin's colder, then you only have to shuffle a smaller amount of blood to the skin to get rid of those thermal watts. You still lose. So we actually, in a lot of the data we've seen, and there's quite a bit of research showing this too, is we call it like a heat strain on your body is actually the biggest component. So it's a function between core temperature and skin temperature is the most important thing. That's why the riders going down to the Tour Down Under are going to be feeling it, because it's going to be hot out. So they're going to have a harder time to get rid of those thermal watts. And the body puts in defense mechanism to do that.
On that note, one way I often think about it, and I don't know if I'm right in saying this or not, but it's kind of like having a sports car or performance car and turning on the air conditioning to keep you cool inside. You turn on the air conditioning, the system works to cool your body, but it will detract power from the engine of the supercar. Is the body working the same way, that if you're having to work to keep it cool, you're drawing power away from that you could be put into the pedals?
Yeah. And then also you can think of another mechanism, like your sports car analogy. If the engine temperature goes up too much, they're going to just pull all the power off so the thing doesn't really overheat. Because the problem is, if you start pushing those temperatures too high for too long, heat-related illnesses are really serious. Heat stroke, you can die from this stuff. And there's been cases that happen. So it's pretty serious. And then people have had heat-related illnesses. They can take a really long time to recover, because your body senses is going back into this state, and it says, we're never going close to there. And I've worked with a couple of athletes, when they get to they're still having problems with that. When they get to a certain temperature, they almost have to stop. And that takes a long time for the body to realize again that it can do that again without doing irreparable harm.
So you've kind of talked us through what happens when you either increase the intensity, increase the temperature, or both, I guess. What uses are in knowing that? Surely that's something that we have no control over. You have to go harder to win bike races, and sometimes bike races are in hot environments.
Well, there's a few things you can do. So number one is awareness. Being aware, I think that's 80% of the game, actually. So starting to understand that when your temperature goes up, your performance drops down for an hour record or time trial or triathlon pacing strategies. Number two is you can train for it. You can make your body more efficient at getting rid of those thermal watts. And that's a next big thing. And three is cooling strategies. One of the teams we worked with, they said that I worked with quite a bit. They said, the biggest thing you guys did for us is bring in awareness. Everyone's thinking about it now. They put it in their training programs. Everyone's thinking about how to do pre-cooling, cooling during the events. And it's in their philosophy, or they've been quite successful with some of the procedures they're doing.
There's a lot of terminology and phrases bandied about heat, and I just want to figure out which of them are referring to the same thing and which are different. So heat training we're about to talk about. You've then got adaption, acclimation, thermal load, heat strain. Are they one and the same thing, or well, I'm guessing adaption and acclimation.
Everything is, the first one I want to talk about is probably heat training and heat acclimatization. That's probably the biggest confusions.
And they're not the same thing.
They're similar but different.
Well, let's start with training then.
So, and most of it's, most people think about, I'm going to be going down to the Tour Down Under and something like that, or I'm going to go to Kona. And so I need to acclimatize for the environment. They are correct, but it's much more efficient if you think I'm racing, I'm going to do an event, and during that event, my temperature, I'm going to get hot, and I need to be more efficient. That's what we call heat training, is just to be aware in competition. Again, in competition, your temperature goes up and your performance goes down. So we can train your body, we can prepare it for that stress and make your body more efficient. And that's heat training. And that works. Doesn't matter if you're in Ireland or Switzerland or in Australia. You're going to get hot and your body can be more efficient. Remember that gross efficiency, all those numbers, all we can do is make more efficient. If we can cool your body off more efficiently, you're going to become more efficient and you're going to go faster. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is the preparation is similar to going to a hot event, but a lot of times a hot event, we just do it a slightly different. So let's start with heat training. Heat training is pretty simple thing to do. Most people can do it at home or on your own. It's not rocket science. But I'm going to start with a warning is anytime you're doing heat training, just be aware it's one of the areas athletes like to push themselves. Don't push yourself with heat. If you're starting to feel really uncomfortable, a bit nauseous, or are there any kind of signs, just stop. There is no benefit. There's actually only detrimental benefits or detrimental results if you push yourself. I mean, really, any kind of signs, there is no benefit in stopping. It's like the first time you go into a Finnish sauna, your body can't handle it. And so if you're feeling uncomfortable, you just get out, you come back, try it again the next day. We had a great result with someone preparing to go to Tokyo Olympics. And the first day they put him in a heat chamber and they had the team for this one event, was in cycling. And they said one of the really good athletes, they almost had to pull him out. He couldn't handle it in the least bit. And they thought they'd almost hurt him. So they just kept sending him there every day, 45 minutes to an hour, just doing his exercise. And at the end of 2 weeks, he could not comprehend why he had a problem. He was just at the same level as everyone. The adaption is a really easy process. The adaption happens very quickly, but there's no benefit in pushing it. You just come back, do it again, and your body will adapt. Same thing if you go in a Finnish sauna, you go in the first day, go in the second day, third day, and after a few days, you're going to be sitting there reading the newspaper like all the Finnish people do. So that's this warning. Don't push yourself in heat. There's no benefit of over pushing else or stressing too much. So all heat training does is you need to get basically just hot enough so you kind of get up to maximum sweat rate. That's basically it. All you're trying to do is turn it on. Your body's getting hot and you get maximum sweat rate. And an easy way to do this, like if you're on the home trainer, is warm room, no fans, overdress. You can wear some of those funky looking paint suits you see some people wearing. there are different ways to do it. And a lot of times you can do this on easy day. So you're just trying to raise your temperature. A lot of times you do it old school. You're not doing it to power these workouts. You do it to heart rate. And if you have a core temperature, you can look at that too. And you're just trying to get there, maintain a heart rate, and have that maximum sweat rate. After a few sessions, a lot of times people notice is they'll be doing the same workout and their power numbers start coming up pretty significantly, pretty quick. So they can sit there at the same temperature and same heart rate, and their power numbers keep coming up at an elevated temperature. So the key parts of heat training is basically, coaches will differ, is it's usually, they say around 38.5 degrees, but it's just, it's a pretty warm level. It doesn't feel too hot usually for 45 minutes. And so when you're up there or max sweat rate, you just hold it for max sweat rate.
Oh, bad news. Bad news. This is where the free version of this episode cuts off. Of course, if you're a member of Escape Collective, if you've headed over to escapecollective.com/join and signed up, then you can get the member feed and you get this whole episode. But we're cutting it off right here for the free version. Head on over, escapecollective.com/join.